While working on this course, Spline made some updates and changes. So in this video, we will look through all updates and features Spline has added while recording this course. Let's start from variables. You may notice this little dot in some fields corners. So this is a part of variables. Variables is a dynamic values you can manage, and with these values you can make different animations. So for example, in case of simple rotation animation, the value for this animation would be 0 degree for the first state and 360 degree for the second. So the animation works based on this different, from 0 to 360. But what if you want to have a random rotation? Or another one example. What if you want this text object shows not the static text you typed, but some numbers, like a counter in this example, or real time, like this? So to do that, you need variables, and there are 6 types of variables: number, string, counter, boolean, time, and random. So the idea of variables is to manage some dynamic value and then assign this value to some input. Then, when the value will be changed by some input, you will have an animation. The possibilities of the variables are unlimited, but to work with variables, you need to understand simple rules of logic and conditions. What do if, else, and other stuff like that can do. Variables is a pretty hard topic, and I don't recommend you to dive deep into this until you will kind of fluent in Spline. Then you can watch this official tutorial about variables. I did only one simple project with the variables, the actual watches, which shows you a real time. Now let's talk about screen size event. This event can be helpful when you export your scene for the web and you want this scene looks good not only on desktop screen but also on mobile. So the idea of the screen size event is simple. With this event you set breakpoints. By default there are 3 breakpoints: mobile, tablet, and custom, which we can understood as a desktop. And then you add an action for specific breakpoint. So you can manage animation of the object based on the screen size. For example, I have a screen like this, and it looks good for desktop screen size, but it doesn't fit into mobile screen. I can use screen size event, and for mobile breakpoint, I can add a transition. So I want my object, when there will be mobile screen size, change their position. Or even simpler example. Here I have a camera object. I just add a view state for my camera with different zoom, and then I set screen size event for my camera, so when it's desktop size, my camera has zoom equal 1, when mobile equals 0.5. So now I can check here in the play mode with this switcher how my scene will behave on the different screens. Very helpful. Gaussian splatting. This is a quite nice thing. Now you can export into Spline the Gaussian splatting models. The Gaussian splatting is a method of generic 3D based on Gaussians. With the Gaussian splatting method, you can really just scan object or a place by your phone and then generate 3D like this. To create Gaussian splatting, you can use mobile apps like Luma or Polycom. Create your 3D model using your phone camera or video. It's not so necessary to have LiDAR on your phone. Then, when your model will be ready, you need to export correct file. In case of Luma app, better to go to your account from the web. Here you can find this file, Gaussian Splat, the PLY file. Now you can just drag and drop your PLY file into the Spline viewport. No worries if you see some mess, it's okay, because then you need to set the crop area to cut off an extra part of the Gaussian Splat scene and focus on the central object. And you can add more than one crop area. You can change the shape of the crop area, you can move area, and set the own center depends on the model, in case if your object not in the center. Also, you can manage the scale of the model and rotation of the container. And probably you will need to rotate the whole model because it can be put upside down. After you define your central part, you can apply crop and delete invisible part of model. Gaussian splat in the Spline is an experimental feature, so if everything will be okay, then this thing will stay. Otherwise, later this option can be removed. But for now I can say this is an interesting thing, but very resource demanding. With Gaussian splat, you can do things like this. Now let's talk about particles. We already did particles in one of our previous lessons using a sphere and the cloner options, but it was more like imitation, not a real particles. But now we can add a real particles, and with these particles we can do things like this, or like this. So to use particles, first of all, you need to add a particle emitter, the thing from where particles release. You already may saw it here under the plus icon. Nice things about particles. It starts work as soon as you add it to the viewport. So you don't need to play scene every time when you want to check it. All you need just select the particle emitter object. While emitter selected from the right, in the object panel you can see a bunch of sections, which may look scary, but no worries. It's quite easy to understand what they are responsible for, just playing with them. So particles consist of little images. In Spline you have a few default pictures you can use as a particle, but you also can upload your own image. Then you can set colors. You can set 2 colors, and then you can select how these colors would work. Or particle will smoothly change its color while life cycle, so this is a blend option, or particles will randomly fill by these colors. And then you can change particle size, and here you can equally change size for all generated particles, but in the bottom, in the particles randomness section, you can add some randomness to the particle size, so some particles would be smaller than another. Then you can rotate particles image. You can manage the quantity of generic particles by birth rate slider. How long particles would exist after birth you can manage by lifetime. With alpha and size fade, you can manage the picture of the appearance and disappearance and the size of particles while moving, like from big to small or vice versa. And then you can manage speed, and speed here is like a pressure, like how water pours out of the pipe. But what about the shape? Now we have a rectangle shape, from where these particles fly out, but we can manage this shape. In the next section you can choose a shape. And nice thing here, you can select any object. For example, you can type a text and apply this text object as a shape from where particles will be released. But why are the particles going up all the time? To manage direction, first of all, you need to set gravity. By default, gravity equal 1, plus 1, so that's why particles are going up. If you set gravity to -1, then they will falling down. But remember, we also have a speed, and if the speed will be too high, our particles, even the gravity is -1, will go up, so always check the speed and position of the shape. Gravity and speed could be 0, then particles will stay in one place. And the nice thing also happens when you move the particle emitter object. So for example, you can add a follow event to the particle emitter and create a nice hover effect. And also one cool thing is that you can save your particle setting to the library, just clicking on these 4 dots. Also, in this list you can find the particle force object. These objects interact with particles. There are 3 types how force interact with particles: collider, attractor, and vortex. So based on one of these types, particles will interact with the particles force container. You also can change the shape of this container, intensity of interaction, and other options. Particles will interact with particles force only if in the particle force section for particle emitter you will select force you added. Playing with different combinations, you can achieve unique results, so try to play with the other particles attributes. And the last updates happened while recording this course is iOS support. You can export your Spline scene as a 3D for iOS app. Well, technically, you can embed your Spline scene into the app using Xcode, so as soon as you will create some 3D in Spline, later this 3D can be integrated into iOS app. So you can say that you are designing 3D for apps, which is a great skill, I think. But more interesting thing here is the app generator. You can literally generate a whole iOS app from your Spline scene by pressing one button. I don't know what can be a practical benefit from this possibility, but it sounds great. More information about this you can find in this Spline video presentation. So, as I said in the beginning of this course, the Spline tool is growing fast. But no matter how many new options Spline will release, what is important is to understand basics. It's so important to understand the app principles and philosophy, because then it will be much easier to understand all new features Spline will add. And of course, to have a good result of your work, you don't need to know 100% of the app. I think it's better to know one thing well than all of them but partly. See you in the last video.